You're listening to Inclusive AF with Jackye Clayton and Katee Van Horn.
And we're recording.
Hi, and welcome to Inclusive AF. My name is Jackye Clayton.
And this is Katee Van Horn. And we're going to do a little AMSR. Is that what it is? It's
ASMR.
ASMR. Not really. We wouldn't do that to you.
But I do look like I got in a fight with my microphone. It is the coldest. We're recording this on the coldest day of the Waco year ever. Since I've ever lived in Waco, it's never been this cold.
It is not cold in Arizona today.
The weather today in Waco is 9.
The weather today right now in Phoenix is 54 and it's going to get to 64. So we're winners over here.
We are winners.
But yeah, I think everyone's having like major cold situations.
I think, we've just had enough.
Of all of it.
It's only February and I'm already over 2021. It was supposed to be my comeback. Not based on any facts. Everyone just decided.
The year of the comeback, but not really.
But not really.
Oh my God. So yeah, I do feel like 2021, it's not been delivering so much of what we expected. I mean, we have had a lot of things that have been slightly disappointing in the past couple of weeks.
Let's just start.
Yeah,
with
like
the capital.
Do we want to start with
the 6th of January?
And then, so we are recording this. So this is Monday, President's Day, that we're recording this. You all will hear this in a few weeks, but we are recording this, and it's interesting because we just got the verdict back on the second impeachment trial against Donald Trump. And again, he was found not guilty. But I did find a really nice...
But he wasn't found not guilty. He was acquitted.
I beg your pardon. Sorry. Yes, he was acquitted.
Vernacular is very important.
But I also think it's interesting that like Mitch McConnell, like as soon as he walked out of the room, was like, by the way, the guy's a criminal and he totally caused this and you should arrest him immediately. And it's like, no, that was your job.
That's like real
dude.
talk though, like on a jury. That's like real, that really happens.
Right.
Because of the pressure. And it's like, get real. This is, maybe we should talk about that today. We can't split. They talk about these two parties as if these two things live in a complete vacuum all by itself, without realizing these are attached to people and we do have choices. And I think we're going to see, I don't think it's fair to put everything as you're a Republican. Like we fight really hard not to do that in diversity work. Like, oh, you're a white woman, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to wear a mask and that you have a little dog and that, you get your nails done. Like we fight hard to be like, see the whole person. Okay.
I don't get my nails done. I used to get my nails done, but then like COVID. And so now I'm like, it doesn't matter. But I do need, we're getting into that time in Arizona that you kind of have to have a pedicure or it ain't great because you're in sandals.
You're just not allowed out the house. Great. It's not.
But I mean, right now we kind of aren't allowed out of the house. So it worked out last year. So are we talking about, do you remember that Dave Chappelle skit, when getting real goes too far?
Say that again.
Do you know that Dave Chappelle skit, when getting real goes too far?
No. Are we having one of those moments?
I think we need to have, no, because I think we need to get real, but I just think it's a funny skit. So for anyone who hasn't seen it, I mean, I think he's done it. Or no, it's like, sorry, it's not, I just looked it up. When keeping it real goes wrong. And it's just funny, but it's the, like when white people try to be black or when white people try to do the things that they maybe should not do. But I know that's, I just was thinking,
I don't know if I'm ready. It's 9 degrees, Katee. The filter is out.
It made me think of it because you're like, are we going to get real? Yeah, we should. But I just want to caution you that I am still a white woman in this conversation.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean,
So-
I'm on board, but I also don't want to, you know.
But let me tell you my favorite part about you being a white woman.
Only one
if
thing.
I might. Well, lots of things. I think the funny part is our dynamic. I think our guests appreciate that moment, but people haven't seen us in other situations. There's several situations. Katee and I will be called into it, and the next thing you know, I will be voicing my opinion, rolling my neck, sucking my teeth, and Katee will be like, I think what we're trying to say, I think what Jackie's trying to say is that it was really one of our first interactions, if you remember, in person in Austin. Was it in Austin?
It was
I was
somewhere in
going
Texas.
off on this person about their lack of diversity, proper training, and how they're not doing enough, and almost killing them at like 2 a.m. and Katee saved their life. But it goes to people's like not understanding. There is a difference between, it's why we fight so hard to not have the labels of putting people in boxes, because it gets rough when you have to get real with people.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And I think I remember that interaction as well. I don't know that I saved a life.
It was
but
2 a.m. Well,
it was 2 a.m. So it is a little, there are some things maybe are a little gray. But I also remember one of our first dinners together, and we had a friend of ours, a mutual friend with us, and and I don't even know if you're going to remember this.
oh God.
She made a comment and was talking about like her Black friend, Jackye. And Jackye got up from the table, not because of that. Jackye got up from the table to step away for a moment. And I just asked the person, like, does it have to be your Black friend, Jackye, or could it just be your friend, Jackye? And they, kind of got a little defensive, but then we had this like great conversation. And it's that whole thing of, again, like the tokenizing, but also
I am so glad I don't remember that conversation. Who, where, when?
We'll discuss who later.
Oh.
But no, it's a friend of ours. Like, and she has owned up to it and like has been like, oh my God, I'm so glad we had that conversation because you did kind of open my eyes. But to your point, I think there's this. It's what we talk about all the time, that you can say things in a room that I can't, and vice versa. But it's also like in a good way. Like there's a lot of positive that comes from that. But it's also, and I don't like, I want to be clear that I'm not like, oh, let me bring Jackye back from the ledge. Like in no way, shape, or form. Because I'm always like, no, do more, say more things.
No,
because
Katie's usually like, she's right. So get ready to catch these hands. It's never that bad.
I do not like the physical altercation connotation that you're making right now.
It's never been like, well,
it's
maybe
never
mentally
been
for me, it's been that way.
Like
but
in our minds, actually, maybe, yeah.
But it's kind of like those same moments, like I'm going to walk back into my high school reunion looking like Jessica Rabbit and turning heads. It's not going to happen. In my mind, it might have happened like that, but it wouldn't happen. Kind of the same thing. I just think what's interesting is that the good news is that we make people feel safe, and they should feel safe in having these conversations. But at some point, I'm still a Black woman and you're still a white woman. Like at some point, we can only talk about your misogynistic tropes or the sexism that's going on within your organization so long before you have to like get real till it hurts. Right. Sometimes you have to do that.
Right. And I think it's interesting because I have one of my very dear friends, Angela Huey, and I will say her name because she would be more than happy for me to share this. She leads an organization here in Phoenix called One Community, and they support LGBTQ rights, and they've done some amazing work in the state of Arizona. And her whole thing is, she gets work done by one coffee at a time. And so like her whole deal is like, I just want to have a conversation with you. I'm not trying to tell you that you're wrong in your beliefs, but I just want to tell you my story or tell you why this is important to me. And I think I think you and I both are very much we're bringing people along on the journey. but it's also the way that I vocalize it, the way you vocalize it, it's different. And as you said, like in my mind, I'm saying very bad things. There's a lot of cussing in my head,
Right.
but it doesn't come out. And it's very much like a productive, and you're the same way. Like it's very much wow, you just said something super ignorant, but I'm going to go ahead and keep you in the fold and walk you through why this is not the right way to think, which I appreciate.
I think that's the hardest part of our work. And I think what people who are not in this work don't realize is that you go through it every day.
Mhm.
And while people sometimes we're seeing change and feeling like there's a definite different vibe on the planet right now than there was 2 years ago, 6
Mhm.
months ago. The reality is that we have a long way to go. And in doing that work, it is interesting having to see the correlation. While we are helping people with their organizations and from a human resources or employment standpoint, the internal trauma that so many people have gone to that goes largely unrecognized. And I think that comes up a lot.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things that the daily trauma, and it's, we talk about microaggressions and we talk about the impact of microaggressions, and I'm actually doing a series of trainings for a group, and I'm doing the same training multiple times, and one of the topics is microaggressions. And there's a video that, it's all about microaggressions being like mosquito bites. And, and some people get bit by mosquitoes more often than others, and like the damage that it can do. And obviously microaggressions are the mosquito bite. I've also been, I've had it referred to, and this is by the Clayman Institute out of Stanford, when they're talking about gender and microaggressions, they talk about 10,000 cuts, that like when you get a paper
by
cut,
1,000 cuts.
yeah, when you get a paper cut, not a big deal. It's annoying, but whatever. But if you get, 10,000 of them in a day or 1,000 of them in a day, like that ruins your whole day and takes over your whole day. And so it's not oh, this person is overreacting, because it's how many times today have they dealt with something that was not okay. And I think it's also, this kind of goes to what we had originally kind of chatted about talking about in this episode, was around, the expertise and the work, and thinking about how this work actually is portrayed, but then also paid for. And what I mean by that is like there is this myth that HR folks should just be able to like get it and go do it, and that they know everything about diversity, which they don't. I mean, that's like asking someone to like start doing, comp and regression models and this kind of, and like, no, they're not going to be able to do that just off the top of their head. And it's the same thing, diversity and inclusion, like there's an expertise that I think people don't realize, understand, care. And that is frustrating, because it's also the things that you and I talk about and the things that we do at work and how they impact each individual. It took us years to get this. It's not like something that we just okay, cool, we got it done.
That's right. And it's like, you think about gymnastics, right? Like people are in gymnastics, but some people are better at floor. Some people do pommel horse. And then some people have decided, this is what I really want to do. I really like doing uneven bars. That's my jam. And so I think that the people within diversity and inclusion that you're looking for are the people who have gone through a particular journey. Like we've done HR, we've seen, benefits, or we've seen all those things, to decided that's not the HR that I want to focus my attention on. And in my case, I want to focus on diversity and inclusion, especially as how it relates to hiring, whereas Katee does a lot more on the other side after they're hired, but those are still very specific roles. But when you pay, I feel like when you pay somebody, if you don't pay somebody, you're not paying for expertise. You're not necessarily getting the expertise, and it can get in the way. It's a lot easier for me to try to get to the end, or try to get to a resolution when we are working together strategically on a plan, than it is if you're just talking to me as we're eating chicken wings, watching the game, which we haven't done in years because.
Right. Well, and it's, I think, I guess it's the whole, like, let me pick your brain, or, hey, can I ask your opinion about something? And, we just were mentioning before we started recording, a friend of ours that, she is all about, yeah, I can totally help you out if it's not going to take me a ton of time, or, I'll give you X amount of time for free. And then after that, you're going to have to pay me. And I think that that's part of it too, is that some of these things people just assume, like, I am all about helping folks out and helping folks learn. That's a ton of what I do every single day, is just educating folks. But there's also this piece that you should get paid for the expertise that you have, and you should get paid for the work that you do. And I can do more by helping people and actually being committed to, yeah, I signed on the dotted line that you're paying for this, or, I, agreed to do whatever for you and you're paying me. So there's like a level of commitment that's very different from, hey, I want 4 hours to pick your brain about all of the things DEI.
It's a commitment and it's a goal. There's a goal in mind, because it's not me saying, going to like an employment lawyer and saying, is this legal? Like,
right.
That's a pretty cut and dry thing, which it never is cut and dry with lawyers.
No.
So it's like, well, can you tell me more? But it's the same thing with diversity and inclusion. I find that if you're asking me for a favor, I'm just giving you my frame of reference more than my professional frame of reference.
Right.
It's more of I'm more protective of my friends and family, or people that look like me, not look at me, because today everybody's looking at me and they're checking the internet. Have you seen this lady?
Again, it's very cold in Texas.
It's cold.
No one is judging. Jackye she is wearing a awesome beanie today and a sweatshirt.
I don't have any.
So she's trying to just stay warm. And in Texas, it's kind of similar to Arizona. We don't do winter clothes. We don't even understand what they are. No. So I can see that you have a few layers on, because that's really the only way to survive this. 42,000 layers.
Don't even know what.
Sorry.
No, but I'm sorry too. But it's just there's a certain part that I think it also helps on the other side, knowing that we're paying for this person's expertise allows people to receive the message greater. Like, otherwise it's like, oh, you're being critical, or I don't like these answers. But it's like, no, you're paying for the expertise, which means I have to be honest with you. I think people don't often recognize this is very emotional work. It is really hard. There is a part where you have to, a lot of the work that we do internally, and the way that we were all, not we all, but the way that I was raised in particular, tells me no, and to be quiet and to not talk on the issue. And the expertise is what pushes you past that, to say that was a really wrong thing, that this is problematic. I'm not going to say wrong. This is problematic. Let me explain to you why, or what could potentially come out of this, rather than what in the heck did you just say, kind of situation.
And how could you think that was okay? Yeah, no. Right. And I think this is the way I look at it. And I think, not to put words in your mouth, but I think you and I are similar in this regard. If something happens in our group of friends or in a situation, we'll call it out to a point, but it's more from a, hey, let's have a conversation about it. And I think this is actually, I'm glad we're talking about this, because I think this is something that comes up in training a lot. When I'm working with organizations, they're like, oh, I wouldn't dare to say to my peer that, hey, you just had a microaggression, or hey, you just said something that isn't okay. But we have to do those things. And yeah, it's hard. And you're like, oof, this feels yucky. But there's also we're not going to get better unless you do. But there's also that line we all have to draw that is, yeah, I'm not going to go too deep on this, or there are certain people that I just don't engage because I'm like, it's a waste of everyone's time, because you think that you know the answer. I think that I know the answer, and I have to protect my own well-being.
That's right.
But it's also, I'm thinking of a particular person that I want to beat right now, but no beatings allowed. So yeah, I think there's this, to your point on the protection, like protecting yourself, or like making sure that you're cool with your friends and help them along on their journey, but also everyone's on a journey and you can't fix everything. And the emotional labor to try and do this 24 hours a day is brutal.
It's why I don't want to be your Black friend.
Right. Right.
Because I can't, it's like, what? And why people need to look at it like you're not, it's like if you have relationships and you don't want to hurt people or you don't want to put somebody through that, right? Whether it be professional or personal. And then you want to learn more about diversity and inclusion and someone's a member of the LGBTQ community and you're like, oh, you're gay. Can you tell me why we celebrate Pride? Like they're already going through, like there's already an emotional component and you're just poking the bear. Like you're just asking for someone to stand up for a whole community and for your own well-being, but you're creating, PTSD trauma for the person. But when you're a professional, it's not fun, but you get used to it. You're able to say, oh, I know what this is, or I feel where this is coming from, or let me put my professional cap on. And I think we all do that. Like if you do taxes at work and you're an accountant and you're doing somebody else's accountant, there's a shift in the dynamic. I can tell you with most people that are going to underrepresented people to all of a sudden represent the whole entirety of a population. When you do that to a person that you care about, your relationship is never the same. And it's usually the person that's part of the majority group that feels great after the conversation and without realizing the complete damage that they've caused the other person. And it's also why you have to have allyship. I know that Katee knows when I'm going to need a step back or when Katie's like, I'm going to step in here, Jackye, so that you don't. I mean, it happens. And
I agree.
I think it's why we're together. And sometimes where I'm like, okay, Katee seems a little bit upset. So let me just, it's not speaking for the other person. It's really just giving time to get a breath.
Yes. And I think, and that's part of it too. It isn't a, let me speak for you, because that's not my right and not my job, and vice versa. But it is let's give you space, or let's help to, that's like when I think about allyship, the way that I think about it and the way that I try to perform it isn't let me speak for someone or let me be their voice. No, it's how can I stand arm in arm with that person? And so in a moment where I can feel that you are not okay, or that whatever is happening is not okay, I'm going to stand with you arm in arm and go, how can I help? How can I be here? And whatever that thing is, I'm going to do. If you're like, nope, I've got this, I am going to punch someone in the nose. Actually, throat. Yeah. We say throat punching in HR. A lot of throat punching in HR. The violent issue. The violent
maybe
episode.
We should ask someone in feeling. Well, I mean, maybe we need a professional. But we all need professionals. You can't do this work without a therapist either. Of trying to put those numbers. You hear so many stories. Have you ever heard a story and you're like, it's almost like you think it's your story, but it's not. Like you'll hear something and you're like, wait, that didn't actually happen to me. It's just happened to so many people that I feel like I have to make a voice for something that I don't own. And so it's like, that's why you need a therapist. It's like, I cannot speak on this issue until we work through it. And, one of the things that is interesting and dynamic is that you have to be very strong while being an empath at the same time. You have to be willing to absorb a lot, which is why people think that diversity and inclusion people are therapists. Like, let me tell you about my racist grandpa. And you're like, okay, I'll help you through that situation. Because they know you're not going to judge them personally, that you are going to listen to them, that you are going to try to help them with a solution. But I think it's important to mention that everybody does go through their own trauma around race or issues and the way that they were raised. And I think it's something, because we haven't talked about it a lot growing up, or it's something that maybe we didn't experience in our own homes, that we should just say all people need to go through this story. It could be the first time you realize that you were racist towards somebody in the 5th grade and that you probably hurt them on a permanent basis and you didn't realize that until you're 40, right?
Right.
Or you didn't realize what we found recently was that you didn't think that you had any discrimination against you, and then all of a sudden you realized, oh, I didn't get that job because I was smart. When you have to think back to those times. It's worth going and being specific when trying to get a therapy to work through those issues, and being specific about the issues you need to talk to. I think we're seeing that more than ever, where people are looking for, before it was like, oh, just whoever's in my insurance plan can be my therapist. But it's like, no, I want somebody who understands something in relationship to racial trauma, or dealing with hard parents, or being a child of divorce or something. It's important to get those things to make sure that you're really being heard or understood. Otherwise, you're going to get a textbook answer.
Agreed. And I have a therapist, and I think that's one of the things that I really appreciate about her, is that she does understand some of the trauma, and can talk through it with me, but also can kind of still put the onus on me of, hey, you need to work through these things, and here's the steps to do that. But understanding and having that, it is the empathy piece of like, I may not have walked in that exact shoe or had that exact same situation, but at least being able to relate to it in some way. And that's why I also like to do some of the conversations that I really appreciate with folks is, it's giving them an example of, here's something that actually did occur in the workplace. And, maybe it wasn't your actual company, but this did happen. And you see people like totally shocked, and you're like, no, this actually did happen. Like, so the one I use, and we may have even talked about this before, there is one that it was actually cold that I read, and it was a female engineer, and they were like on their Slack channel or whatever. And in the Slack channel, she was like, kind of, hey, this is what you're working on. This is what you're like, not telling people what to do, but just kind of clarifying who's working on what today, and like who's writing whatever line code or whatever the heck they do. And so she was just kind of, reiterating that in the Slack channel. And this new guy on her team, like, responded back with some comment of like, why are we listening to you? You're just a woman. And, and she, of course, like,
smiley face.
Right. And of course she's like at her keyboard going, oh my goodness gracious, how do I respond, react, whatever? And before she can even do anything, one of her peers, also a man, responded back and just said, we don't do that here. And it's one of those things, like, it's such a simple line, but it shut the conversation down. And I think that's part of it too, is like, allyship is kind of, what do you need in the moment? And also, like, how can you react? And what are those things that are like in your back pocket to say? That's what I also think people need, are like some of those tools and tips of like, what do I say when someone's like, oh, you're my awesome black friend? Like, as the person sitting there, not as the black friend, but as the other person in the room, like, what are you talking about? Like, that's a really dumb thing to say, and here's why, but in a kind and gentle and loving way. And I think that's like the piece that people need so much of, but it's hard. It's really, really hard to be.
That's why you need a professional. Like, I get so upset when people put people in these places that haven't gone through the work to try to put them in charge of diversity and inclusion, that don't do diversity and inclusion work. There's a natural thing that we all do if left unchecked, or in personal situations where you're just taking care of yourself. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. If I have $1,000 to spend on my community, you can best bet. I mean, I live next door to my mother-in-law. The Claytons are going to get the lion's share if it was left just up to me. Right? It's like, oh, I can do anything. Oh, well, then I'm not doing anything. That's my everything. Right. But then, and that's kind of how it is. You're leaving things unchecked, or I think that's why so many diversity and inclusion programs are slanted towards one particular group, not on purpose. It's, even if somebody has well-intentioned, if they don't do the work, if they haven't read the books, if they haven't gone to the seminars, and they haven't done the classes, and trust me, and I think Katee can attest to this, people who are in diversity and inclusion are in webinars and watching speakers and reading books constantly, where you will never, ever become a sole expert. We're always doing the work, always. And And if you're not, that's why, it'll just slowly creep in when all of a sudden, okay, apparently deaf or hard of hearing are the only diverse group that we care about at this organization because we've put all of our eggs in that basket. And so you need the person that's going to say, it looks like, what's missing from this dynamic? What piece of diversity are we missing from? What are we not benefiting from? Or we're not understanding because we haven't welcomed a person into our various group. And sometimes it means maybe we have enough Black women on this committee and we need to look for more white men on this committee. I get so much grief over putting together committees of diverse people in my diversity work. Everybody in my diversity work should be Black, or they should all be women, or they should all be Black women. And why do you have a white man on your diversity? I have to listen to the white man to figure out. There's a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm trying to be, especially us, we're trying to be inclusive AF. That means your voice is still important. Nobody's less important. It also means you have different experiences. You're also a member of the LGBTQ community, or you might not look Indigenous, but you are Indigenous, or there are certain things where you have to be able to do the work, but you have to be able to break it apart to the actual true work of diversity and inclusion. And you also have to be able to take those punches when they come, because they do.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think it's also, especially right now, there is a major focus on racial diversity. And we absolutely understand why. We understand that the Black Lives Matter movement is critical right now. And we also understand, very recently, or, since COVID, we do also understand that Asian people have been violently targeted with, different attacks, different things. And so those are two communities that we're like, no, we really need to focus on those two communities.
That's right.
That does not in any way, shape, or form say, okay, well, now we don't have to worry about trans people, or we don't have to worry about people that are hearing impaired, or whatever it might be. And I think that's also the piece, like the diversity, because I will have this every once in a while, like in HR teams. HR teams are predominantly women. And so then you'll have, well, how do we diversify this group? And it's like, well, by hiring men. And, and so in marketing is another one that, like, a lot of times it's very female dominated. And so it's having those conversations. My way of thinking about diversity is who's around your table of your team and who's not there, who's missing, who's underrepresented. If there's one of X, those are the folks that you probably need to focus on. Or if you don't have any of whatever, why are we not looking there? And I think that's a piece that a lot of folks, to your point, because there is there's a spotlight right now on certain factors and certain groups, that doesn't discount those other groups that are also marginalized in horrific ways. And so, like, it's also that, like, to have that diversity around the table to say, how do we build this product? And I, I like to go to the product building piece. It is the, how do I build this product? And when I'm thinking about building this product, I have to think about everyone who might use that product. And unless I have the most niche, group of folks that are buying that product, it has to be able to be used by everyone. And what are those things that we need to think about? The whole idea, the UX group. So, people that are looking at how do we actually use this tool? How do we think about this tool? Are they taking into consideration that, you might have someone that is colorblind? Or are they taking into consideration, the usage of how do I move my mouse, or whatever it might be? And some of those things that's that UX expertise that you need to have when you're building products that I don't have. I can, have a lens of it, but I think this also goes back to, like, having an expert do the work, not just going, oh, well, hey, you're colorblind, so you should go ahead and teach us how to do all the things UX. That doesn't make someone a UX expert.
Let me tell you something that happened that I was full on giggling at midnight.
Okay.
So my daughter and I were watching a movie this weekend, and It was on, like, Suvi, I don't know, some free network that, as long as you let them show commercials, you can watch the movie for free, whatever it was.
Okay.
Tubi, I don't know.
Tubi. Yeah, I think
Tubi?
that's
okay,
I think it's Tubi. Yeah.
So we were watching it. It was like midnight, and the first row of commercials were all Black people in the commercials. And it was like, you know, a dishwasher commercial, a mayonnaise commercial, and a Cheerios commercial. So we're like, oh, cool. So then again, the next row of commercials, all Black people in the commercials. And I was like, this is starting to feel a little weird. And my daughter was like, yeah, but we're on your computer, like with your, you know, Black Lives Matter mask and your Black girl magic candle. You have influenced the cookies. And so I bet you we don't see any white people in any commercials. And then, so it kept happening. And then Hannah was like, aren't we only 25%? Like, are we even, isn't it like 14%? Why are we 100% of the commercials right now? Like, where are the Latino, Latinx people? Like, where are the white people? And then it started feeling really awkward. Like, because then I felt like tokenized and targeted. I'm like, okay, write all these brands down. I'm not buying any of them ever.
Oh, no. No, that's not, you can't do that. Because
well, I could, but I was just saying, like,
I'm just
but I was just like, oh,
it feels weird. But here's the thing that I'll tell you. So
the pendulum swing.
Absolutely. But here's what I'll tell you. So I have, and it's not even like, well, it was purposeful and it was intentional, where I have built presentations and I have made every visual in the presentation people of color. And I have had people come up to me after the presentation like, oh yeah, okay, D&I person, like, ha ha ha, look at you trying to be all diverse and put all these people in your presentation. And my question back to them is, okay, but if it was all white people, would you have even noticed the visuals? Would it have even been a thing? And so it is what our brain is trained to see and what our brain is trained to believe. And so those brands that probably have had commercials for hundreds of years with all white people are starting to wake up and go, oh, wait, there are other humans on the planet.
Shocker. Well, my fear was, if my next door neighbor was watching that same movie, would it be all white people in their commercials, or would it be a blend? I mean, I have had people, it's kind of, and I hope people are listening and just share this, because this is something that I do now. When people say to me, did you notice the panel didn't have any diverse people? I was like, that's like a Tuesday night. Like, this isn't anything new. Did you notice?
Right.
Because it's always like that on my side. Did you notice? Oh, you did? And what did you do about that? You called me? How is that helping? Like, what are you doing to get those things through?
Yeah, that, and the other one that has recently happened, and it's almost like, it's kind of like that whole cancel culture of like, until you have more diverse people on your, you know, on your group of presenters, I'm not going to listen. But then you'll have the person come back and be like, how do you know? Like, using just a visual to identify someone,
yes,
is not a great way to do that. And yes, you could say, okay, they visually don't appear to be Black, Latinx, whatever it might be. But then there's also this piece of like, and I am remembering a specific event, and it's a group of folks that you and I love dearly. And they got like, kind of, people were all ganging up on them, if you will, like, oh, I can't believe you don't have more diversity. And then they like started to actually talk about like, well, here's who we have and here's why they're diverse. But it was also like it stinks that they have to like defend themselves when they're actually, I mean, their lineup, once you actually backed up off of it and looked, you're like, wow, actually this is a amazingly diverse group of folks with global, like they are all over the globe and presenting different ideas from all over the globe. How awesome is that? But because visually they didn't appear to be diverse, people were like, oh yeah, you don't like diversity, you're anti-diversity. And you're like, no. But yeah, I agree with you. I do it myself, and I am guilty of this, of like looking and going, oh, okay, there's no women, or there's no this, or there's no that. But then I have to like pause. We just did this in a thread the other day where it's like, oh, that board has no diversity. Well, then when you started to dig in, you're like, wait a minute.
This might be the most diverse board I've ever seen. I will tell you something that has not happened in my experience. I don't think I've even told you this yet. So this is like, you've heard it here first. I know. I talk to you every day. It's amazing if I haven't, but I don't think I have. So we have we're working on our recruiting and for my company, and we have hired somebody on a temporary basis to help with some recruiting. She is from Russia. She's a white woman with blonde hair. She has a very thick accent. She lives in Boston. And she called me. She had called a person had applied for a job position, and so she was 2 minutes late to the call. And she was two minutes late. We know, especially, it happens. 2 minutes is not the worst. Zoom today took me 7 minutes to get on a call because of everything going on, because it's snow.
Because everything's
But
frozen.
I digress. So she called the gentleman 2 minutes late, and he started yelling at her. Then he started demeaning her because she's an immigrant. Then he started demeaning our whole organization because of some of the founders being from India. As she's on the call,
Yikes.
and like promoting their own, like what they called an American agenda to a person who's been with us for like 2 weeks. And it is easy to think that things like that happen to me and not realize that that happens to other people. It never happened to her before. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know if she should stay on the call or if it was going to reflect badly of her. And she almost quit. And it's so interesting when people are at work to realize that when things like that happen, it's like you question yourself. You put yourself in there. This can't be happening. Like, this isn't right. Why would this be happening to me? Do other people feel that way? And took a strong, educated, smart woman, and it took 5 minutes to break her. She wasn't just upset. She was broken.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I think about is the next day she's doing recruiting for diversity, and someone thinking by looking at her headshot that she's not diverse and she doesn't know what it's like to be discriminated against because she's got this blonde hair, whatever, from Boston, which is, I don't know if you've Googled that, but not the most culturally warming place on the planet. So you can't judge based on those things. Like, you have to do the math and do the research in this work before. I mean, granted, some of the times what I've started to do, I don't like being a part of the problem if I can't be part of the solution. Like, if the problem is, oh, well, where are the women? So then I usually try to say, well, who would I ask that would be in an underrepresented group that could have a benefit here? And sometimes I can't find them very easily. Or sometimes I think I find them and I call them and say, oh, do you ever speak? And they're like, yeah, it's $20,000 for the first hour, $500 per word thereafter. And you're like, oh, maybe that's why. And
good on you. Make that
and
money.
I'm like, well, dang, I need to get up in this gig. But I mean, I think people don't realize there's so many layers in diversity and inclusion when you're dealing with work, because you're dealing with their personal trauma, you're dealing with company culture, you're dealing with your own as an individual, and then you have to, there's a lot. Don't go to someone who you think looks diverse and say they should be responsible for our whole diversity plan, because I'm telling you, it hurts people. There are people who are painfully in this work.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. We're in the work. We're doing the work.
We're doing the work.
And we all need to be doing the work. So,
and that would make it so much nicer if everybody could just do it.
If everyone could do the work, that'd be really awesome. That would take a lot of work off of our plates, and we would appreciate that. I think we actually even talked about that with Rowdy. Like, hey, we have job security right now. We would like to not have job security. We would like this to be fixed and solved and move forward. So, Jackye, thinking about what we talked about, other than going out and watching Dave Chappelle, when getting real goes too far, what is the lesson folks should take away from this conversation?
if you want somebody to help with your diversity and inclusion, you need to be prepared to hire an expert and pay for their expertise. It comes from doing the work. It's not work, because there is a difference between coming from an emotional place and opinion or things that have been steeped through research. So this work is too intense to get some pinch hitters. You need to find people that can help you serve your needs, and you best do that by finding a professional, coming up with a contract, looking for a return on investment, and being able to hold somebody fully accountable for the work that you're needing in your organization. Oh my God, that was great. I should put that in my running
We
for
should
mayor
totally
thing.
record that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, let's record that. I'm going to put it in my bio in a couple of weeks. What about you, Katie? What is your lesson that you want to share?
My lesson is very similar to yours. It's pay folks that are experts for their expertise. And it is, in all arenas, not just in DEI, in all arenas, pay your experts. But it's also be very thoughtful when, we have had a lot of folks putting out their shingle right now saying that they are a diversity, equity, inclusion person and they don't have the background. And I'm not saying they need to have a million years experience, but I'm saying, like, have they done this in some form or fashion? And also don't put that emotional labor on someone if they don't have the expertise, because it's already the labor, the emotional burden is huge. Don't make it worse by hiring someone that isn't equipped to actually help you. And that's not like, I don't want it to be like, hey, let's, don't hire anyone but Jackye and I, because that's not what I'm saying at all. There are a million folks that are amazing. And I love,
because we're really busy. We can't even do that right now. Like, don't even ask us for referrals.
Yes. And I'm more than happy to do that, because I love referring to other folks who are doing great work. But I also, the other thing I would say is just try to remember that the folks that you are talking to, working with, this is their life, their lives, their life. And while you might not understand completely what their experience is because you haven't lived it, listening and having that conversation, and not in a teach me all the things, but from a let me get to know you as a human, is so important. So
that's a good one. I haven't heard that. Yeah, you might not even like them as your diversity person either. You might not know what they have to bring to the table if you're just picking people up off the street.
Right. And it's okay if you pick people off the street if you want, but not for DEI work.
No, but do it because it's 9 degrees outside and
because it's cold out and they need someplace to be warm. All right, my friends.
Okay, boo-boo.
Thank you so much for joining us today on the Inclusive AF podcast. This is Katie Van Horn.
And I'm Jackye Clayton, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.